Carbohydrates are not making you fat. They're one piece of the equation. There are 3 macronutrients: protein, fat, and carbohydrate. 2 of those macronutrients, fat and carb, can be used as energy sources. Both of those macronutrients are stored in our body. One of those macronutrients is stored in great abundance in our body. One of those macronutrients can only be stored in limited quantities in the human body. Now, carbohydrate, we have limited reserves of this as glycogen stores. Our body can actually generate more glycogen stores in the absence of exogenous glucose, and we can generate endogenous glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis. That's not the enemy of ketosis. It's not bad. It's actually required for a ketogenic state. Without gluconeogenesis, we wouldn't be able to maintain stable blood glucose levels. Now, the other energy macro, other than carbohydrate, is fat. And that's the macro that we store in most abundance, or the energy macro rather, that we store in most abundance in our body. Our body stores fat, which is a very valuable fuel source. Unfortunately, most of us have trained our body never to tap into that fuel source. We have overfed ourselves on both of the energy macros simultaneously. We've eaten a high carb and high fat diet. We've avoided protein to the detriment of our satiety and hunger levels, and instead focused on hyper-palatable foods, processed junk foods made by these massive grain companies, these huge multinational corporations, General Mills, Kraft Foods, all these Monsanto and Cargill products have essentially taken over the international food market. And we've been duped through industry, through advertisement, and we've fallen prey to actually consuming a lot of these junk foods. What do these junk foods consist of? They've been wrongly demonized as being just high carb. Now, a lot of us have been using a low carbohydrate approach to allow our bodies to tap into those body fat reserves, which we've blocked off through dietary intake of constant high carb, high fat foods. A lot of us have figured out that using a ketogenic approach, a low carbohydrate approach, or even going like on a full-on carnivorous diet, as many people are finding, is very, very helpful for managing blood glucose, for keeping insulin low, for maintaining super low levels of hunger so we could tap into that body fat and burn it. But the foods that got us fat are being kind of demonized in the low carb community as just being high carb, which is not true. When you think about the junk foods that are available out there, they're not just high carb. They're processed, refined foods that are essentially chemical weapons against our palate that make it so difficult for us to stop eating. We're eating hyper-palatable fried donuts. We're eating, in Scotland, people like fried, what is it? Is it Twinkies? Deep fried Twinkies? That might be in the US, or maybe it was Mars bars or something. But people are eating high fat and high carb foods that are also very high in sodium, which most of us are not getting sufficient amounts of. And this results in hyper palatable foods where even the texture has been studied by scientists in laboratories for years, so they could figure out a way to make it nearly impossible for us to resist these foods. You get crunchy, soft, chewy, gooey candy bars. And are those high carb? Sure, they've got a lot of sugar, they've got high fructose corn syrup, which has been shown to increase hepatic insulin resistance. But they're also high in fat. What's a Snickers bar made out of? Well, it's chocolate, which is fat, a bunch of sugar, some nougaty nut crap, and then a bunch of different textures and flavors that are specifically targeting pleasure receptors in our brain. We become addicted to these foods and don't know when to shut off eating them. We don't know when to stop. What is ice cream? Is that a high carb food? Yeah, obviously there's a lot of sugar in ice cream. But what's the second word in the title of that food? That is a food made of cream. It's a food made of fat with sugar. Sweet plus fat together. is delicious. We're not used to having sweet and fat together. When you consider the seasonality of foods, the availability of carbohydrates, they are seasonal foods. We do not have high carb, high fat foods for the entire year when we are providing our own foods for ourselves. But in our curated, unnatural environment in cities, all of our food is processed and packaged, and very few of us have ever been involved in growing our own food. How many vegetarians and vegans out there do you know who've ever grown any of their own food? All right, these people love to virtue signal about the environment and this and that, yet have no idea how difficult it is to provide for your family and yourself on your own land using just plant foods. But it's very easy to do this using animal husbandry, where animals will take grass, will take herbs from the environment like this, and my cows will eat this, and they will turn it into protein and fat that's digestible, assimilable, and delicious. So they process it for us. But these huge corporations have found a way that they can remove that cow from our lives and actually become mama's milk for us. We're looking to Ben & Jerry's, we're looking to Burger King. We're eating donuts, fried sweet bread. We're eating junk food that's been weaponized against our palate in order to not allow us to receive proper hunger and satiety signaling. Another aspect of the processed food industry is salt. We all have minimum requirements for sodium. That's why we seek salty foods. Every single human culture in the history of the world has used salt. When you read Weston Price's book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, all of the people that he visited in the 1920s and 30s, all of these indigenous populations, he called primitive people, not as a pejorative, but primitive as in they weren't eating what he called the foods of commerce, the foods of industry, the foods of genocide, the foods that, when they invade a culture, completely destroy our ability and our ability to feed ourselves through convenience, and the foods that destroy our bodies as well. But they're not bad because they're carbs. These are highly processed and refined foods. The white flour, the hydrogenated soybean oil, the high fructose corn syrup that is in these processed foods are not bad because they come from plants. They're not bad because they might have carbs or they have fat. These are weaponized foods against our palate that we aren't used to consuming and eating, and we're eating these in very, very high amounts, and they're very low nutrition foods. When you sit down and you eat a food like grass-fed beef, a fatty cut of steak, you're getting fat-soluble vitamins, you're getting protein, which is the master satiety-regulating macronutrient. Because protein is the most important macro to eat in order to keep hunger down. Once we hit our protein threshold, we get sufficient protein, we won't want to eat all the carbs. We won't want to eat all the fat. And industry knows this as well, which is why such little amounts of protein are in these processed foods, because once we get enough protein, we stop eating. If you get enough of the steak, you don't give a shit about the cake. In fact, I can put a steak and a cake in front of my daughter, and she won't take the cake, but she will take the steak. So the carbs aren't necessarily the problem. They're one part of the picture. High carb plus high fat plus high salt together equals we gorge. We're used to having carbohydrates seasonally, and when it is available, that's when we're often storing nutrients, storing fat for possible famines, for possible food shortages in winter months. The seasonal availability of food should be considered when selecting our diet as well. Now, I've recommended using ketosis seasonally for many people over the years. We don't need to be in ketosis all the time to lose fat or be healthy. It feels pretty good. I'm in ketosis most of the time. I don't find myself ever craving carbohydrates. In fact, I gravitate towards a diet that includes very little plants. Over the last year and a half, I've eaten basically no plants, eaten a carnivorous diet based on animal foods, animal fats and proteins. Now, I didn't do this because I had to. I did it because I enjoyed it. I started a ketogenic diet over 5 years ago. I started getting fat-soluble vitamins in, focusing on nutrient density, vitamin A-rich foods, vitamin K2, vitamin D-rich foods like grass-fed butter, cod liver, beef liver, heart, fatty cuts of meat. One of my favorite foods, ribeye with bone marrow on the side. Right, we started focusing on these foods after our daughter's teeth were negatively affected after our experimentation with plant-based eating that was deficient in these fat-soluble vitamins that we require. What I find is that when people focus on these foods, these high-fat, nutritious foods, these animal foods where you get enough protein and enough fat, and are hopefully eating nutrient-dense parts of the animal like liver, where you're going to get more B vitamins, more copper, more vitamin A than you find in many other foods. In fact, there's more vitamin A in liver than any other food that we know of on the planet. When people eat these foods, their satiety drops dramatically and they feel good. Once we get adapted to a ketogenic diet, we're able to efficiently burn fat. Then we can tap into our body fat. We can go long periods of time without eating. And that's the magic of keto. It doesn't make you lose fat just because you pull the carbs out. It allows you to regulate your hunger by partitioning the macros that you do consume. So get enough protein. Carbohydrates aren't necessarily bad, but there are many types of carbohydrate that we probably shouldn't be consuming regularly or even ever, like high fructose corn syrup, sodas, donuts, refined flours, and grains. There are carbohydrates that I give my kids regularly though, right? We keep fruit around. They're growing children. We don't put them on a ketogenic or carnivore diet. They prefer to eat mostly animal foods when they have all these foods available to them too. You know, our kids can have cake when they go into town. They very rarely ever ask for it. In fact, for most of the day, our kids seem to prefer, on most days, our kids do seem to actually prefer and select low carbohydrate, high satiety, protein, and fat-rich foods. They have these foods available to them. They'd rather eat steak than fruit. And when they do want fruit, they've got plenty available and they'll eat it. When they do want glucose, they'll find the good foods that they want in our home and they'll eat those. But we don't keep the cake around. We don't keep the junk around. We don't think carbs are bad for them. So the carbs have been kind of demonized when we should be looking at the processed refined foods, the impact of grains, of anti-nutrients in these foods on our bodies. And this is why we made the Ketogenic Edge cookbook. We called it the training manual for low carb, ketogenic, and paleo cuisine. We call it a training manual because that's what it is. It's not just a list of recipes. It's there to help you to understand how to prepare nutrient-dense, unrefined, whole foods keto meals. There's a whole section on how to prepare organ meats, the most nutrient-dense parts of the animals. My wife spent over a year and a half making this book, and it really shows. So creating a foundation of food habits around foods that you prepare, so you know what you're eating, with minimal ingredients. I'm not talking about Quest bar crap keto. I'm talking about real unrefined keto foods. So check out the book if you're looking to create a foundation of nutritional habits and food prep, which is crucial. We can't rely on junk food. We can't rely on Quest pizzas, Quest bars, and birthday cake flavored protein powder in order to hit our macronutrient needs. We got to get protein from real foods. And we got to stop fearing the foods that we need, the animal foods, the protein and the fat, while omitting and forgetting how detrimental these processed and refined junk foods are. Even junk food keto, I see make people fat all the time. We get so many private coaching clients who come to us because they gained weight on keto. They were under-eating protein, overeating fat, eating junk food keto very often. And these people end up gaining body weight. Some people come to us on uber clean keto diets where they've been told by certain gurus to under-eat protein. I'm talking about grown women who are eating like 30 grams of protein a day. Criminally negligent levels of protein. And they're gaining weight and they feel weak, lethargic, and shitty. Protein is a master satiety inducing macro. We all need it. So don't be afraid of the protein while you're consuming gobs of processed junk food. We've been told meat bad, processed junk food, plant foods good. Eat plant-based foods. plant-based foods, vegan Oreos. Come on, let's get real. The processed food giants, these international corporations who are feeding us the wheat, the corn, and the soy, you think they care about our health? Bayer Pharmaceutical, formerly IG Farben, bought Monsanto recently for $66 billion. You think these people feeding us these junk foods care about our health, our gut health, the health of our children, our families, and the future of our culture? They don't care. But we do. And that's why we're here doing what we do. So carbs aren't making you fat. Carbs plus fat plus salt, refined junk foods making us fat. If we get enough protein, if we get enough sodium in, our hunger levels will drop dramatically and we will find that we can burn body fat sufficiently. Which is why a high-fat keto diet isn't always the best for everybody. Although I'm not a big fan of high carbohydrate diets, some people lose weight on it. You're going to have to restrict fat if you're eating a lot of carb. A lot of people do well on a higher fat diet that's not ketogenic, eating about maybe 100 grams of carbs per day. Athletes who need more glucose for glycolytic performance might do better on that. But we all need fat-soluble vitamins. None of us need processed refined junk food, and not a single one of us has an inherent need to eat carbohydrates. It's an optional macro. So anyways, you can find more at primaledgehealth.com. Our next group community coaching, the Keto and Carnivore Collective, is going to be in December. I think that's going to be about 3 or 4 weeks from now. It's either going to be the first or the second week of December. You can sign up. There's a link down in the description below. We are still doing private coaching consultations this month, but I've tried to decrease the amount of one-on-one clients I take on by creating the Keto and Carnivore Collective, where we have a community setting, where you have community support, you have more access to your coach, and Jessica and I use a Discord server where we're able to do live interactive lessons and voice chats at least 2 times weekly, answer your questions whenever you need them, and this gives you more time, more support, and much more content than just private coaching where we meet once during Skype and communicate via email. Some people are more shy, they don't like the group coaching environment, but the group coaching is so much more fun. I like to be able to see people interacting with each other. You know, I get so many clients where I want to actually connect them together and see if they can help each other in certain ways, just through support and talking about the issues that they're dealing with. So I think it's really, really fun doing the Keto and Carnivore Collective. We had to add carnivore because so many people are interested in carnivorous eating. So the next one is going to be in December. Our November one started last week. It's been really fun so far. What else? I guess that's it, guys. The carbs aren't making us fat. The junk food's making us fat. Insufficient protein is making it to where we're not hitting our satiety signals. Where we're not getting sufficient protein or sodium, we're going to be more hungry. So leveraging the macros and micronutrient intake in our diet can really help to drop hunger levels and help us to lose body fat. So you can find more at primaledgehealth.com. The links are in the description. Now get off the damn computer and television, iPhone, close your freaking Facebook account. Go live your life.